Now, I want to tackle a topic with you here that is something that is, in a way, it's narrow, but something I found really interesting for a long time as I read about, think about the way government operates, and in particular, the use of people who hold a title that is called administrative law judge. And to me, this whole concept of administrative law judges not only fraught with peril from a legal perspective, but also from the perspective of getting justice for the American citizen when they're up against their government, because, as we'll learn in a conversation with our next guest, administrative law judges almost always side with the government agency that is paying their salary. They rarely side with the citizen. And just knowing what government is and what citizens are, I'm guessing that the right answer is probably at least that 50% should go to the citizen and 50% to the government, at least for the citizen, and yet it almost never happens that way. So there's a very specific case now heading towards the Supreme Court, and joining us to talk about it, Peggy Little is the Senior Litigation Counsel with the New Civil Liberties Alliance. Their website is nclalegal.org. Good morning, Peggy. Thanks so much for being here, and tell us about Michelle Cochran.
Thank you, Austin. Good morning. Michelle's case, in a nutshell, is what they call a paperwork violation. Michelle is a CPA, licensed in Texas, single mom, and she worked for a guy who was not particularly professional and ran into trouble with the SEC. She had actually quit her job 3 years earlier because of his way of doing business, and so she was shocked when she herself was slapped with a charge by the SEC. She's gone through this case defending herself pro se once. And the U.S. Supreme Court held that her ALJ was not lawfully appointed, and now they want to try her again before an SEC administrative law judge that is still unconstitutional.
Okay, so there's a lot of questions there. First, why don't we begin with a basic question? What is an administrative law judge, lest it be confused with a real judge?
Very good point. An administrative law judge is someone who is appointed by the administrative agency that is prosecuting you. So your judge, in your case, reports to your prosecutor. That is not the original design of our Constitution, which set forth there should be 3 separate branches, including a judicial branch that is independent and unbiased.
So, and are these people always lawyers? Are they sometimes laymen who just have to read up on something and pretend to be fair and balanced, or who are they?
They're actually lawyers, and very often they have been Social Security judges before they move to other agencies, which means they have absolutely zero expertise in securities law. In the case of the 5 administrative law judges at the SEC now, some have backgrounds in radio, the FCC, communications. Most of them have backgrounds as Social Security judges, and none of them has any expertise whatsoever in the securities law.
Wow. So why is it that these kinds of cases end up in front of an ALJ instead of an actual judge? I mean, why does this system even exist?
Good question. The Congress did say by statute that the agency can try some cases before itself or before administrative law judges that it appoints. And that's problematic right there. But they certainly need to be constitutional. And right now, the SEC's administrative law judges have several layers of protection from removal by the president. And that means that they are tenured and secure in their jobs in the way a real judge might be, and there's no executive control whatsoever over what they do. And that means that they, 98% of the time, people will settle their cases rather than have them go before such a biased judge. And even when they do go through the proceedings, the difference between how they might fare in court, where the SEC wins maybe about 60% of its cases, and before the ALJ, it's in a high 90% that they win.
So far, the Supreme Court hasn't ruled that the very existence of an ALJ system is unconstitutional, right? They're ruling that something else is wrong. Yes,
they are too protected from removal, and that means that they can pretty much do what they want, and since they report to the prosecutor, the outcome of that is pretty predictable.
So now what?
Well, we are taking this challenge all the way, actually, in several cases. We have a case coming out of the 11th Circuit, and Michelle Cochran's case is in the 5th Circuit. And we were very fortunate to have a rehearing ordered before all 17 judges in the 5th Circuit to see if they find that there are constitutional infirmities in this system. And it's encouraging that we got the rehearing. That means the whole court is taking this case very seriously. We've had excellent amicus support. Mark Cuban and some others who have had trials in real courts have stepped in to support Michelle's petition. And we are very encouraged by the presence of such powerful amicus, which is a Latin term for friends of the court.
Is the remedy that you're seeking a sort of narrow thing relating to Michelle's case? Is it slightly broader relating to, these ALJs, has to be easier to fire them, or they have to be appointed by the president? Or are you looking to undo the entire system of administrative law judges and try to nudge the federal court to look at that bigger issue, which I would like to see, but usually, lawyers don't always shoot for the moon because it's not necessarily in the best interest of their client.
Yeah, we have to take these things one thing at a time. Right now, all Michelle is seeking is a fair shake. That means she is to be tried before a lawful judge who does not have these unconstitutional layers of tenure protection. The way the Supreme Court describe those layers of tenure protection is like those Russian dolls that are nested inside other dolls. And so that these judges are absolutely insulated from removal, and that is not what was contemplated by the Constitution when it separated the powers.
Just as a general matter, I would argue that those kinds of levels of protection are far too prevalent and completely inappropriate in almost all of government. And it's one of the big problems with government, but it's especially bad in a situation like this. And it is kind of shocking to me for how long people have tolerated the existence of a system like ALJs, where somebody who works for the prosecutor and is paid by the prosecutor is your judge in a case. You'll almost never get a fair shake in that system, and I just can't believe it persists.
Well, I think your point is excellent, and one of the things the New Civil Liberties Alliance is dedicated to doing is to educating the American public about this abuse of power. Do you know that people are 10 times more likely to be brought before an administrative law judge than a real judge? And we know what the odds are when they are brought before administrative law judge. They have a shockingly grim future ahead of them. The odds of prevailing in those systems is virtually nil.
So my last question for you, Peggy, what's the next step here? When's the next big hearing and where?
I will be arguing this in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals on January 20th. It will be a virtual argument before the judges. We are so thrilled to have the support of so many amicus briefs that have come out in our favor. I think that to have people like Mark Cuban and others who they had a trial before a jury. They had a fair shake. Mm-hmm. And rather than just, wash their hands of the SEC and celebrate their victory, they have reached out to support Michelle Cochran, this single mom CPA in Texas who's tied up in these administrative knots. And they've reached out to say, we're on your side. And I think that's what's best about America is that people, when they see something that's wrong with their government, they do something about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I got to say, I don't have time for a big discussion on this part, but the fact that Michelle Cochran represented herself in the first hearing suggests to me that she thought she had a slam dunk winning case on her side and that she was just going to make this go away. But little did she know that in front of an ALJ, you don't get a fair hearing. So I'm glad you're on her side, and I look forward to seeing what happens next. Peggy Little is a senior litigation counsel at the New Civil Liberties Alliance, their website where you can follow this case and others, nclalegal.org. Thanks for being here, Peggy, and thanks for taking on this fight.